Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of the Dark Sale podcast series. And today we have Alderman Louise Bloomfield.
Hello.
Would you be able to talk to us about your journey as Alderman of the Hobart City Council and what motivated you to enter local politics?
Basically, I've lived here my whole life, or almost my whole life, and I have been involved with small business for most of, if not all of my professional life. And when I became a tax agent, I found that the bulk of my clients were actually small business owners, and naturally you want to look after them, nurture them, make them grow. And I found that the environment of the Hobart City Council area really wasn't very conducive to that. So this running of a council and eventually getting in was actually a innate natural step to being able to supply additional support just simply by talking to, explaining to this council just what small business needs and get things right.
Yep. As a member of the Liberal Party, how do your political values influence your decisions on council matters?
I actually think they influence a lot of things.
Yeah, okay.
And that's because when I chose to become a Liberal Party member, I chose it based on my initial values.
Yep.
Now, I am a small L Liberal, so I'm not going to have necessarily a complete swag of all the things that people think that Liberal Party belongs to, but things like supporting small business, making sure that we have not too much red tape and that we're more focused on getting the economy running well without going into enormous debt are the normal things that I would sincerely believe are the right values to have. So that's what I apply when I help making decisions.
Yeah, okay. Now, before we go on regarding the council's policies and some of the controversies here, I just want to hear from you, what's been the talk on the streets and what's the overall sentiment of Hobart citizens?
Funnily enough, I'm about to go out and do a door knock to confirm what I think I know. So I'm going to tell you what I think I know, and then if I get corrected next week, I guess you'll find out. But I mean, that's the thing. You see, I am extremely grassroots.
Yeah.
So everything that I speak to is because I've gone out and asked. It's not actually an opinion. It's actually based on exactly what you've just said. It's what is the talk? And most of the talk comes from the people being upset with congestion in the streets. And interesting too, people aren't particularly perturbed by having bike lanes. They're perturbed by the way it's been approached.
Yeah.
You know, 2 in one street was too much. And in fact, if you looked at the stats on that, you would have seen that the community was trying to tell us that. They said, we don't mind 1, but 2's crazy, don't do it. So there's that kind of thing. And also too, the lack of public transport's a big deal to a lot of people. And accessibility to the Royal is massive. Real lot of issues of that. I'm actually a chair of the accessibility committee as well for the Hobart City Council. And that means that I talk to all the different advocates for all the different disability groups, and it's very, very much a common issue. So there's some of the things. Older people find it harder with the expense of parking, that we've probably priced ourselves out of their market, which is unfair. You know, when you're retired, you do have a limited income. We need to make sure we respect that.
Yep.
So the other issues would be fire and stormwater. So one of the things that concerns me and a lot of the community is, you know, the fires that we just had up in Margate Way, you know, they were very much a bit of a wake-up call, because statistically Hobart is 20 years late for a major fire event through the city.
Okay.
That's pretty scary. And the stormwater issues, I think, are just starting to raise their head. Look at what just happened with Taswater in the centre of the CBD. That wasn't good enough whatsoever. And I've now found, as you probably would have seen, that those stormwater drains were built in the 1940s.
Okay.
That's a bit old. And I actually had queried, well, how much of our structure is that old? And it was like, oh no, you've got to go to Taswater. So still investigating, because I think those things need to be spoken to and lifted. You know, so there's some of the issues that we do see, and of course you've got the stadia issue. We've got bigger things like that as well. But the things for me, for local government, are those things.
Going back on to your discussion about Taswater and also the hospital, do you think there are a lot of things in the Hobart Council where you have to go through a bunch of processes and loopholes compared to like maybe other places in the country which might not have that?
I always thought we had better access, not worse.
Okay.
I think culturally there's been some highlighted issues where, you are sometimes deliberately blocked. One of the interesting things that was a first hurdle for me was when I first got elected, we then were assigned portfolios, and I was very grateful to get the City Economy portfolio because that matched exactly who I am.
Okay.
That was great. So I got this director, Director Allen. And anyway, Jackie Allen was great. We got along well until one day. Do you remember when Mr. Mansell, the artist, decided to do a call out for dead white people so that he could make art out of them? Do you remember that?
No.
It was pretty awful. Anyway, the portfolio for arts was John Kelly, and he was with me at the time. He got a phone call from media, and he was mortified. And I went back to my director and said, you know what? I need to know what you guys are working on at all times, just the projects. Just tell me what the projects are on my portfolio. So if I get that magic phone call from media, I don't look like an idiot. I had to go to mediation to get that list. Now, that's not good enough, right? I was supposed to be kept in the dark completely on my own portfolio. Now, that has massively changed. That is no longer the case whatsoever. We have moved on. But that would show you where we started till today, where now we're reaching out and going, well, we've got to get more consultation going on. But as far as reaching in and getting data, there have been a lot of RTIs. I'm not always sure of the value of them because the value seems to be the accidental findings rather than the direct findings. And whether or not that is cost effective for both the council and ratepayers, I question.
Okay. Moving on, a recent report found that the Lord Mayor and senior council staff breached privacy laws by disclosing personal information without consent. What measures do you believe the council should implement to prevent such incidents in the future? And do you believe their recent response was adequate enough?
Okay, so this is where my real life experience gives me contextual difference to a lot of other people. And that is, when we look at the Privacy Act, we have to look at the breadth and the scope and the volume. Okay, so, and then also the impact. Did this embarrass, humiliate, create other issues? And I do think some of those elements absolutely occurred, and technically absolutely it occurred. What has happened as a result, and it's gone through the Integrity Commission, and they came back and said, look, the staff require education, elected and some elected members. I certainly haven't been requested to do some. There've been the request for the Lord Mayor and possibly others to do education. That's absolutely should happen, absolutely. I do also think that there should have been some access to training for all elected members on that, because any of us could do that. But I think at that point, though, I think whether or not the public feels it's right or wrong, I think that probably was, given the size and the context, the scope and the volume, may well be sufficient. Because this type of legislation exists when you find a business or an individual has divulged large amounts of data of a lot of people, where you find all their stuff suddenly on the dark net or other places, or you find private photos. Do you know what I mean? It's like the reason this law exists is because the damage and the context of what occurred in this was, in the scheme of things, small. We shouldn't be using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. I'm not saying that it should not have occurred, absolutely, and I do think that it had to be highlighted, it had to be dealt with and all the rest of it. But I do think that where it has stopped may well be fair on a number of levels. It might not feel right to the public, but I think the public needs to also understand that the scope and the sheer size and the volume and the numbers. Imagine if the Lord Mayor had divulged 50 names and so forth at a go, or done things like that, then you know what? This is where you really go to town. But it was only one on one instance. I don't think it's justified. She cannot justify it, absolutely not. And I'm not ever going to give her that excuse. But what I am going to say is that the level where they stopped it probably is the best we're going to expect and see from multiple areas. Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, it probably doesn't feel right, but you have to remember that it's not like you're pregnant or not pregnant. It's like there are levels of this.
Okay. Kind of relating to all this, do you think more of the progressive side of the council is more interested in cultural or niche issues rather than social or economic ones? And if so, what are the negative impacts of that?
There certainly is very limited understanding of how to spend money. I was horrified to see that when we lost the $170,000 grant for Collins Street, they just reached in and grabbed it out of the contingency budget. That contingency budget was way too small anyway by a number of thousands of dollars. So it was already too small. They only had about 2.5% or something really tiny, and it should have been a minimum of 10 as standard. And then they pretty much took a third of that to kind of top up the other. Now the staff are, I wouldn't say they're programmed to agree, but they are absolutely swayed by whatever we decide. And I feel that the responsibility to be appropriate with money is lost in this place. They just honestly do not understand how things work. And when it comes to understanding that small business employs people, supplies all the different elements that we need to live well, and then they don't listen to them or don't understand how to supply a good working environment for them, it's lost on them. They'd rather green up a park. They'd rather put in a bike lane. They'd rather do all those other things because somehow that feels nice. And it's more like a feel-good kind of deal here than it is we've actually got to put our nose to the grindstone and get some hard work done. That's what disappoints me more than anything here.
What a lot of Hobartans have probably witnessed over the last year is an increase in the amount of public meetings and even meetings being cancelled. As a member sitting on the council, why have we seen so much volatility as of recently?
Okay, so that comes from behavioural issues, for starters. The public meetings occurs when the public feel they're not heard. That's the end of that conversation. That is it. If you don't feel heard, what are you going to do? You're going to find a way of being heard. I watched that flow through with UTAS, and I do know that group was horrified about having to do that. They did not want to do a public meeting. They were horrified. But what else did they have? They had no other mechanism of being heard. And, and we're not seeing anything different, by the way, with Collins Street. Yes, they're going ahead and doing it. And yes, I reckon they'll get a very good turnout. But the people who are doing it, I wouldn't say that they're enormously, they're doing it because they have to. They're not doing it because it's going to give them something. They don't see that at all. And it's purely as a result of the lack of consultation. Now, the lack of meetings in council and the council dysfunction, I sadly do have, I had a theory and now it's become more evidential. And that is, when you walk into a room and you are not appropriate, you don't speak well to others, you're sarcastic, like last night people were being belittled, that whole I'm so superior, condescending speeches, that is not pleasant, okay? So why put yourself through it if you don't need to, for starters? Or worse than that, if you go in there like I did last night and vote, then what, you're going to get ridiculed because of the way you voted? Like, why? Why would you choose to do that? So with planning in particular, if you remember that one with the Vinnie's building, and everyone condemned us for that. What people don't understand was that there was a report that said that there was like 100 or something ridiculous number of vehicle movements next to the building where people will be walking, and we're talking older ladies who possibly might have issues with being able to walk well and all the rest of it. We saw it as a major safety issue, and we were simply asking to say, please, can you review this and get it sorted? And That particular group refused to. We begged them that night and they refused to, and there was no choice but to vote it down because we had nowhere else to go. If we let that through, the people would be looking at us and going, well, how did you let that through? That was unsafe and inappropriate. And to be fair, what right do we have to say that people who are older and vulnerable have less of a right for a safe environment and a good design than anybody else? Should they just get what they're given, or should they actually be given the same treatment and the same good development protocols as everybody else in this world? Or do we just give less to people because they're poor? You know, I think that was the big question there. To be ridiculed by the Lord Mayor was appalling. The throwback that we got was horrific. I do a lot of women-based functions, and it was horrible to have to constantly explain, no, I don't hate women. No, I really did feel that that was the appropriate decision. And no, you know, I do value these ladies. I should not have had to have done that. It should have been understood. But we were never allowed to give that voice, and that was really savage. So when you have that treatment for doing what you believe is the right thing, that's pretty harsh. Even last night, to find that apparently Dr. Google and Wikipedia apparently are priority information sources over our professional opinion is pretty poor. And, you know, that was pretty tough to go, oh, so we've based it on Wikipedia rather than a professional opinion. And here we are, we've now refused something based on Wikipedia. That didn't feel very good last night. Would I had to be there? Yes, I did have to be there. Did I feel heard? No, I didn't. And I do question, given the size of the motion to refuse was so huge and detailed, clearly written before the meeting started, does it make you question that why did we bother debating? Because it appeared to me that if they've already written the reasons to say no, that they really weren't open to us saying anything at all. That's a concern. So when you have all of those dysfunctional issues, you sit there going, well, you know, I'm going to think hard about it. The other thing is too that I think people really need to look at who is and who is not regularly attending. Okay. And it's very easy to say that it's from one side or the other, but I think if you look at the real numbers, you'll be quite concerned.
Do you believe the Hobart City Council, or at least some selective members, are more focused on promoting negative campaignings and roadblocking things rather than being more constructive in the workplace and, you know, working together or trying to negotiate?
I think that there's two pieces to that. Firstly, we had some significant negative campaigns to get elected. That has made me very much a advocate now for positive campaigns. Okay. And I was a bit naughty last state election where I didn't care, fear nor favour. If I saw a negative campaign being promoted on socials, I would call them out and say, please don't do that. I know I wasn't very popular for it, but I did feel that just a little bit of this was removed, a little bit was less negative. The problem with negative campaigning, where you pull your opponent apart rather than talk about what you want to do, basically means that when you all get elected and you're all facing yourselves around the room, you have people there who genuinely are now not so happy with you. You don't have any goodwill. You have nothing in the bank. And everyone is supposed to, forgive and forget, move on. No one forgives and forgets or moves on. They say they do, but they don't. And that comes out with the voting and the suggestions, and it comes out with the sarcasm and all the other pieces, and then things start to fall. So when all of that occurs, then all the other pieces happen, because I think in some cases the staff may either contribute to it or they may follow it. And then we have the other issues where you see the negativity, but ultimately it's because we had a culture that suggested you either behave one way and we'll play with you, and if you don't, we're going to make it really hard. That's been highlighted, and we're now starting to see that pulled out, and that's why discrimination cases, which is probably the negativity I'm mostly referring to, has now occurred. I've not really been a fence sitter on it so much because I've been in the fray just as much as everybody else, and I admit that. However, what frustrated me was that the level of understanding of what discrimination is was very poor. It should not have been poor because these are professionals. I am not someone who, give me tax law. I know tax law very well. But do I know discrimination all that well? No, I don't, because I am actually not a lawyer. Okay, and we have staff who are specialised in that who did not give the advice at the time. Now, we have removed a lot of staff and they've been educated and lifted, but we did have a lot of discrimination occurring because they were not handling the fact that we had people who were outspoken with versions of what they felt was what they wanted to do, which is different to what they were used to, you know. So that has created problems. I'm looking forward to it settling, but because legal issues take a long time, it is still taking a long time. I think we've got more to fall out before it finishes, which is hard, but we get on. So, yeah.
Last year, the council made a decision to grant Tasmania Police real-time access to CCTV footage and has raised privacy concerns among experts. How do you reconcile public safety with individual privacy rights in this context?
It's interesting you mention that because that was something that I looked at some time ago as well. Because, for instance, when I was elected initially, I had to fire clients because some of them thought they were taking advantage, and I don't take stock of that behaviour. And some of them became quite difficult. I won't say violent, but it was very frightening. We ended up installing CCTV on our practice to basically have evidence of any inappropriate behaviour so that I could call it. Do we ever look at it? No, we don't. It's just there, and it's a safety measure. But on my door, I have something that says that entering, we have CCTV, and entering this is basically supplying permission that you're accepting going to be recorded. So we do that. But in order for the city to do that, how do we do that? Oh, you're about to enter the city, you're going to get recorded? It doesn't happen. So as a result, it's one of those things where it's a very fine line, isn't it? I do think that there has been some really good outcomes in the fact that as things have occurred, they've identified people and sorted things, that they've had some fantastic responses as a result. It's probably required, in fact, less bodies on the ground, which the police dearly need, to get good outcomes. But I do understand that people do not like being filmed. What I will say, though, is, if you like to call it a commiseration measure, because I actually inquired whether or not we have the facial identification as well, and they categorically said no. So we might have film, but we do not have facial recognition.
Nothing like what China has.
No, and that's actually really important to keep in mind, because when you talk about privacy, there is a level of privacy that you could actually lose, which you have not lost. And when it comes to the public good, we are only talking about major areas. It's mostly the corridor along Elizabeth Street, for instance, and some of the major areas in the CBD. So I appreciate that there's an issue, but I think they were more upset because the police had the potential to be looking at it live rather than just accessing when required. And I don't even think, look, I can't speak on behalf of the police. I would suggest that it's probably a pick and choose when it is live, as in they know something is occurring. I don't know about you, but I lived in North Hobart for a little while I was having my house renovated, and one night we just constantly heard helicopters. And I would, and if it was daylight, they would have cameras on the ground live looking for the person whilst they had the thing. Obviously they can't do that at night because it won't work. But the point would be that it'd be a tool that one uses live when one is requiring it. So if there's something in action and they want to trace that person and locate them before they do something bad, well, that would be live. I don't necessarily think that it's probably all the time. It's mostly as we have an event, let's go get it done. I do know that... things like the parades, when we have the Christmas parade, I'm pretty confident that that would be live because they have all those families to take care of. You can't possibly monitor that many people with a limited number of staff. You are going to use everything at your disposal, and it probably would be live as a result. So, people have to look at that and go, well, is that fair? I think that is fair because we don't want a runaway truck or an issue or a weird person out there doing something terrible. We want to know that they're nailing it quickly.
Yep. Last year, or was it the year before, that there was the removal of the William Crowther statue from Franklin Square, which was a significant decision by the council that had a lot of groups from all different sides advocating for its removal or to be left in place. What's your perspective on how the council should handle historical monuments that are considered controversial? And going on, do you think the council handled the issue well at all?
This is where I found myself learning things that I didn't even know existed. Okay. Firstly, the decision was made before we were even elected.
Yeah.
So the only decision we ever got was the planning law, and I had nowhere to go on that. And I can remember going to a Liberal Party meeting and getting into trouble because I had to actually vote for the removal at the time because there wasn't anything available to me to say no that would not be lost on appeal. You have to keep in mind that when you vote against a recommendation, that you have to have your ducks in a row. Otherwise, you cost the council money. So you have to be sensible. You can't just simply go no because I feel like it. You have to actually have something solid.
Okay.
I didn't have that available to me, so that's what happened. And that was not much fun. But what I learned, and this is something that made me take stock because I didn't, and I still feel like we still have a question to ask here. And that is that I was aware of Crowther and the issue. We heard about it in the paper. But what I had not understood was the impact that he had on the Aboriginal community when I did an awful lot of training, because sometimes I actually refused to vote on Aboriginality issues at the time during council, purely because I felt I didn't know. And you don't vote when you're ignorant because you have to go and get some more training, and I did that. And the fact that he was a collector of people's body parts and things like that was really quite concerning. If that were my relatives, I probably wouldn't feel very good either. I think if you put yourself in those shoes, you'd be going, I'm not really sure I'm comfortable. And the fact that he bought some land in order to dig up uninterred grave sites of Aboriginals was also concerning. So when you put all that in context, you're going, right, well, there's clearly some distress here, so how are we going to handle it? Equally, I also looked at the Crowther statue and realised that we have unpleasant things in our world. And do we hide from them, or do we smash them up as we see in some civilisations, or do we do something else and somehow learn to walk on by but be respectful? And I did always feel that that middle ground is the one that we really should have chosen. That is, that we need to do something that speaks to this, to say that these very terrible things occurred and it's very inappropriate and unpleasant, but equally it is what it is our history. We have to live with our shame every day, and so we should, and that is how it should be. But equally, to simply remove it from the face of the earth is not necessarily learning or growing, is it? So I guess I always felt very torn in the middle, but having said that, now that was taken from my hands, I have no choice, but I still feel that we should have something somewhere because that is our history. It's like burning books. You don't burn books. You might say it's not a very good book to read, and, I don't think I'll ever want to read Mein Kampf, but should I have it wiped from the face of the earth? No, because I think that it exists because it's part of our history, whether we like it or not. It's just part of who we are. It makes us us, good and bad.
One of the biggest issues that you've mentioned is the amount of congestion in the city. So one of the things is the proposed Collins Street bike lane, which has sparked a lot of debate, particularly regarding its impact on parking, local communities, and just the overall flow of the traffic. Where do you stand on this initiative, and how do you balance the needs of cyclists and those such as business owners and motorists?
At the end of the day, consultation was simply not done appropriately or correctly. It is a common issue throughout council that I have worked incredibly hard. Before we had this, we had the scrambles, and I fought hard on that too. I even had a peer review done on one of the reports, and it was found lacking. It was found statistically poor. So they've had to learn that we're not prepared to stand back and go, well, just give us anything, we'll vote. We're too dumb to know any different. It's like, no. So there's that. But ultimately, I feel that the plan itself was poor. The design itself came apart because of the lack of consultation, the lack of understanding of what small businesses truly need to be able to function. That was frightening because it's one of those things where they say, well, if oh, it's only them, it doesn't matter. And you're thinking, well, one day that could be you. Will you care that no one asked you? And there is an example that shows they've actually got worse, not better. Because you haven't mentioned Lord's Beach, which is the ferry terminal.
Yes.
Okay. This is where we've gone next. After as bad as this is, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but let me explain to you how much worse things have got. Lord's Beach was actually really horrifying, and I actually got pilloried quite sadly on socials for having a stand on this. And that disappointed me because they weren't understanding the detail. And what happened was this motion turned up. The people who lived on Lord's Beach had only been told about this project 2 days before it appeared on the agenda. 2 days before it appeared on the agenda, that this is going to affect their home outside their streets. This is quite a large thing. And the motion itself suggested that we are going to go to consultation, but at the same time, we're going to give the CEO absolute discretion to start spending and developing the project. So while they're doing the project, we actually might ask a few of them what they think about the project. So by the time we find out what they think about the project, how many hundreds of thousands would they have spent on the project? And then they'll go, and then their answer was, well, you know what? If they really don't like it and they've got all these really great reasons, you can always rescind the project. And I said, what about the $200,000, $300,000 you just spent on it? Oh, well, they'll be gone. So now what happens is, even if the project doesn't go ahead, the council has to wear the loss of that expenditure. How is that a good outcome? That means that ultimately there'll be a little bit of a consultation as a side effect, but we really don't care. We're just going to do it. We don't care what you think. And if you don't like it, you can wear the embarrassment of that expense and have that hanging around your neck the rest of your term. Thank you. That's what's going to happen next. And that's the side effect of what's happened with Collins Street, because they really didn't like the fact that they actually had to do some actual research. Like starting numbers would have been good. We actually finally got a delay where they're doing that now, but they're about to start. But none of us know what these starting figures are to know whether or not they'll actually improve or increase or anything. So, and one of the other things was that when the deeper you look into these structural plans and the traffic issues and so forth, is you start. Well, I actually found there was a deep-seated issue all the way in there, but you had to do a lot of reading because they love structural plans and traffic plans, and engineers love doing reports. That's their job, and they're good at that. I'm not a traffic engineer. So what was amusing was at one point I read, I think it was called a Midson report. We weren't even supplied this report, by the way. We were not supplied it. It was found by accident with an RTI by a member of the public, who then gave me 2 pages of it and said, look at this, I found this report. So I then requested the report, and then the report, I went on to read it, and there were very interesting clauses. And the clauses said things like, well, it's not going to be, this particular design with Collins Street or the scramblers are not really great for traffic. It's going to create congestion. It's going to be a problem. But because it meets this thing called TNOP, it's okay. It meets TNOP. We don't need to matter. And I went, what the hell's TNOP? Well, TNOP is the Transport Networks Operation Plan. It is a state government plan developed to, based off idealism like the GEL report, for instance, where we all want to have everyone walking and cycling and things like that. Now, good or bad, that's where everyone wanted to work towards. That's fine. But the problem was with the TNOP report was that they created a hierarchy but forgot about people's behaviour. Now, the hierarchy meant that when you design an engineering traffic management plan, so you're working out where the red lights go and how does traffic flow, you have a hierarchy. So the most important people are the people who walk. The next lot of important people are people with micro-mobility, so scooters and bikes are really second important. Third is freight, so all those people with products need to come in and deliver, they're important. And then after that is buses and cars. Those buses is the bottom 2. And I found that fascinating. And basically you had to apply this TNOP report like a layer over the top of your traffic plan. So I read reports that said, yes, this is going to really cause bedlam, traffic congestion, we know it's going to do it, but because it meets a TNOP report requirements, that's okay. That's how we got here. Now, the reason why it's created issue with this is because, especially in the CBD, is because the TNOP never actually understood that people travel for different reasons. People travel into shop because they choose to, not because they have to, they choose to, it's discretionary. But TNOP works brilliantly in suburbs because you have to go home to bed and you have to get up the next day and go to school or work. That is not discretionary movement, okay? So TNOP works brilliantly there, but it does not work where you can choose to go, no, don't want to play that game. That's where it hollows out the issues and areas, and that is very poor. I am hoping to put pressure on for the government to understand that great report, great concept, but please do not apply it where there is a majority of discretionary choice of travel, because that has created problems for us all.
Yeah. So how do we improve traffic flow in the city? I mean, we've tried out the scrambles, bike lanes. Is there like another alternative option? Altered bus routes, rail.
Okay, so I feel the first thing that we need to do, the quick fix, is the expensive one. The quick fix is get buses in here. Get lots of them, make them reliable and regular and affordable. You do that, things will start to change. It will take a bit of time because people don't trust them anymore. When they become unreliable, people don't want to turn up when the bus turns up. They want to turn up when the bus tells them that they should turn up. If you are starting work at 9, you want to be there before 9, not 9:30 because the bus was late, or 10 because you had to catch the next one because the first one didn't turn up. Your employer won't care, and that's unfortunate, but that's true.
Yeah.
And the same with going to school. You can't be late, the teacher won't care, you're now late. So people won't use systems they can't trust. So get that invested. I think that's your step one. But all other alternatives are on the table. They're just going to take longer because the rail, I think, is more of a toy. I know a lot of people like it, but it's very limited because it can only go down one channel and you still have to have buses to pull them backwards and outwards. If you had a bus system, you'd probably have a little bit more flexibility and you'd reach more people more readily.
What about using that old rail corridor as a busway?
Well, that's actually an idea I had years ago, simply because it's available, it's wide enough, it doesn't need as much alteration as other areas did. It would be, what do they call it, a
guided rail bus
system. So basically you could easily have any bus on there, although they were talking about having extra large ones and just doing that. But you could just imagine if you just had all different buses going up and down exclusively, because then they could go to a catchment, so they'd go up the top of Lena Valley, pick up a heap of people, pop themselves down onto that lane, vroom, straight into town, and they're done. That would be amazing. And it would be cost effective because we're not having to retrain staff, we're not having to reroute money to buy more buses because we've already got them. We simply need to have that road thing redesigned. So to me, that was the most cost effective and instant thing we could do. That would be great. The other thing that we need to do is be more moderate with the bus system, the bike system. I don't mind that it exists. I do mind when it causes congestion, which is unnecessary. For instance, I don't think it's worked at all for Collins Street and Liverpool Street to move down to single lanes. And the reason I say that is because let's look at what's in those streets. Collins Street used to have Coogans in there and lots of businesses and so forth. Well, they're not there anymore and they're only just starting to come right, but they are nowhere near the high net worth businesses that were there, like Fitzgerald's and places. No one values that area because they are not valuable. They are not valuable because people are not there just because they created an environment didn't mean people actually walked there. There was nothing to go to, so therefore it died. And with similar issue we have with Liverpool Street. The fact that the vitamin shop was replaced by a sex aid shop should tell you everything. It literally means that we do no longer have high value business areas, business shops in that area, because they simply are not getting the people. They're not getting the people. We need to understand that we did not create the value that they thought. The big problem that I have a lot of times too is when you look at the data, they all go, oh, look, record data for the year for spend. And then you have to always ask the question, did you adjust for CPI? And do you understand that most of those reports they have not?
They have not, no.
And I don't know about you and I know that you would be going, but wasn't that an automatic thing?
Yeah.
Yes, to my brain it is, to your brain it is,
Yep.
but not to media
Okay.
and not to council.
Wow.
But you know why? Because it looks better. Oh, we got 110,000, whatever it is, instead of 100. Yeah, but we had CPI of X, Y, Z, and then that means that, oh, look at that, we're either break even or we're actually less than we were before. These are the things that make me angry because that's deliberately misleading the public, and I cannot accept that. I am getting inroads in that, but for God's sake, it should not have taken 2 years to get as far as I have to get that sorted. A lot of complaining has been done to do that, for such a simple, small, obvious and professional thing to do. So, yeah.
So with all of this said, what are you planning to do? So what are your top priorities during the remainder of your term and potentially the next term? Trying to push for some of these changes in Hobart.
The changes I want to see, for starters, I'm really excited. I'm hoping it's going to happen. Because one of the things was they said, we need to get small business. We need to hear them. And I went, oh, really? You now need to hear them? Great. And they said, oh, well, the Confederation's only small. And, and I thought, yeah, so how about we get the TCCI, Confederation, and every other peak body that's associated with businesses all together in the town hall and do a forum? Oh, that might be a good idea. So, fingers crossed. I am working hard to do that at the moment. I'm really excited if we can get that off. That will start to change the way business is done. So it's basically about strengthening the connection between small business owners and council, so the council actually gets educated in what is required. That's the first thing. Second is to make sure that the TNOP, the Transport Network Operations Plan, is basically used appropriately and in context. Suburbia, yes. CBD, no. And then revise these plans to make sure that we get it right, because we actually need to have the maturity to say, oh, I think we've not quite got this where it needs to be. This is a hub. We have people going through. We need them to do that because that's how this works. We aren't a very wealthy state, and to steal a half an hour extra or an hour a day out of people's out of people's personal time and giving it to travel is unfair. That time should be spent with our families and time out and things like that, We don't get that. That's not right. So I want that done. The other thing is I've got some other things that I want to do as well. I want to strengthen up the way we do business in town. We have identifiable areas, for instance, like Salamaker. We know what Salamaker is. We know what is at Salamaker. We know the type of business, right? We have other areas like Criterion Street. Criterion Street almost has its own personality, and we have different businesses that collect there that are personality-based. I want to create more of those, like spots, so people go, well, go to Criterion Street, or go to South Hobart, you'll do X, Y, Z, or perhaps you'll go to this area over here in this particular street. Start creating some identifiable areas and give them character and interest. That's something I do want to do because that will help small business enormously. Other elements that I want to do too, especially, the whole climate change thing, whatever, but there was some really interesting work done on plant life, and plant life actually is a great thing to have around business. Hence all the plants. Not that I'm brilliant at it. I'm not the best gardener. But I did appreciate that they have a very good positive impact on people. They also are really good at removing the heat from areas, or less reflection, things like that. So what I also want to do is actually encourage, and we're looking actively at doing it, where we get some more plant life actually kind of growing in the city. So I'm thinking about more rooftop gardens. I'm thinking about more of the things like we have on Ibis, where we have that wall of green where the plants are growing in the wall. We can look at really amazing things like that. And some of the places like Criterion Street, we could even have vines growing over the top. It had to be very high. And this is all, I suppose, what you like to call it, crazy idea. But this is really the budding idea of what could we do if we did that? What could we do if we said, let's have more plant life. I'm not stealing ground space off what we need. Like, I'm not taking away car parks. I'm not taking away anything else like that. There are ways of incorporating more green life in our city to make it more fun to be around. It feels better. It's better on the temperature, all that kind of thing. So that's something else I want to play with. I also want to ensure that the people who have a disability, the people who are elderly and vulnerable, also need, whatever we do, we have to design for them too. Yeah. And I think sometimes some of the green ideas sound great, but they leave these people out, and that's not right either. So it's really putting that net across and saying, I want to really supercharge this place. I want to make this CB exciting, innovative. I love innovation. But we need to also do it with sympathy to others, to make sure that they can be part of, be in the centre of it, be in the thick of it, be some of those customers who want to be there and see what's going on. They're the kind of things that I'd like to do, because one day when I retire, I want to have something that I'll enjoy being part of, that I perhaps helped get there. So there's some of the things that I'd like to do. And culturally too, we talked earlier about how a council can be quite dysfunctional in a meeting. Well,
how would we address those issues?
No.
because you've got a lot of plans here, but how are you going to be able to get a lot of them through when you've got workplace culture and the roadblocks?
Well, I know. Well, this is where it gets interesting, because it's really funny. These aren't on YouTube, so I can't show it to you. I wish to goodness I could. I had to chair the first 2 workshop committees, the Hobart workshop. Now, the workshop committees have voting, like a council, but there's smaller things that get voted on, plus they have the workshop things, right? And I had to chair the first 2. We didn't even know what the rules were going to be. We didn't know how any of it was going to work. And to be honest, I was rather nervous about it, because my experience of the people in the chamber has been less than wholesome. I felt that, I may well be on the menu rather than controlling the room. And that was quite disturbing. So I do things like rostrum. Anyone who wants to run for council or any other thing like that, for goodness sake, good thing to learn to do, very cheap, you learn how to run a meeting, all right? Now, I'd been doing that for some time, and they almost practice being naughty, so I learned how to control it, all right? So, it's really like, well, what do you do when someone's really naughty? Like when they won't shut up, all that kind of thing. So anyway, so I got in there, and I basically read them the Riot Act before I started. I said, look, local government reform has changed. The tolerance of inappropriate words and so forth is now going to be a very high standard in my room. I'm not going to tolerate. I will not tolerate sarcasm. I will not tolerate people being belittled or anything like condescending speech, anything like that. Don't do it, because I am going to shut you down if you do. And when you decide to speak your piece, I want you to speak your piece. Don't comment on other people's pieces. It's not your place. What your place is to speak your truth. What you believe is right, go with that, all right? Now, what amazed me was, I guess I thought I was being pretty grumpy, but ultimately what happened was the room turned around and very graciously did exactly what I asked. And I was really surprised, and we got through a great meeting, because everyone did exactly what I just said. There was no sarcasm. There was no belittlement. We got great concept out, and we were talking about some really difficult topics, like the scooters, for goodness sake. Yeah. I thought that was going to get heated, and it didn't, because I said, this is how it's going to be. And you forget sometimes that when you're in a room like that, tell them what you want. Yeah. People innately will actually look to say, well, you know what? She said that's what she wants. I'm going to do that. And that's exactly what happened. And it happened not once but twice, both meetings. And I thought, wow, if this is all it takes, this is all you have to do. And what was really sad was in the last council meeting, I was horrified to see that we were straight back to the same old. To be honest, the behavioural issues we have, they start, finish with the Lord Mayor. She tolerates inappropriate conversation, behaviour, sarcasm, all that stuff. It's on her. If she's not prepared to direct that room to behave appropriately, they'll do whatever they choose, like naughty children. That's exactly what goes on. So when I asked that the Midson report, the recent one that was released, talk about in Collins Street, when that happened, I had one elected member turn around and go, well, you know, it can't have much integrity and who did this and all the rest of it. And I thought, how dare you suggest a professional who has been paid to deliver a professional report now has no integrity because you don't like what they say? What the hell is that? That is horrifying. Now that is insulting and malicious. And it was called out with a point of order. And you know what? Oh, no, nothing to see. So when we let that slip through the guidelines, you know, you're straight back to the dark times. You know, everything I just showed them, I demonstrated is a real thing. We can really do this. And this room is quite capable of being behaved. And we're straight back to no. So I will tell you this. That Lord Mayor, okay, I am pretty confident, thrives on the issues that are going on at the moment. The more that we have of that, I don't know why it would be a good thing. I thought that running a good, well-run council where everyone is behaving would be a credit to the chair. But we have a chair who prefers not to do that. And, you know, and I used to think perhaps they were uncomfortable with it, but you know what? It's not a point of being uncomfortable. It's a point that they just don't want to, because we have shown them the way. It works. The local government reform protects us. It says this is the new normal. Get it done. But no. So you know what? It's like, as far as all of this goes, we create a good room, we can get things done. Because once you start that journey, the heat dies. It's like you don't stay mad at people forever unless they keep on inflaming the fire. And if you create a room where there is no heat, give it a couple of months, and it's not going to be instant, you'll now have people from the left and the right who could collegially agree to do things. We need that. We don't need adversarial politics. It's a fail. We see that in government. We know it doesn't work. We want these groups to say, look, I know you're left, I know you're right, but we'll give you this if you give us that, and we get this. This is how government was designed, to give us that. And when we go to adversarial, we all lose, all of us. So it starts with the mayor, it finishes with the mayor, and if she's not prepared to do it, I can tell you what, people like me are quite happy to step up and do the damn job, because I know now that I'm more than capable of doing a better job. So, and at the moment, I'm looking forward to seeing how the others do the room, because I've given them a standard that all of them can say, you know what, if she can do it, I can do it. I'm just one of the newbies who got it right. I want to know that everyone can understand that. Let's normalise good, dignified meeting behaviour. So, yeah.
Well, that's the end of the interview, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. No worries. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
And thank you so much for inviting me. It's so much appreciated. No worries. Thanks.
Awesome.
No worries.
How did you feel about that?
No, it was good. It was good. I know I